If you as a leader start pointing fingers at freaking people and pointing fingers at your team, no one's going to follow you when shit hits the fan. And that's the truth of the matter.
Welcome to the Fitness CEO Podcast.
Hey, welcome back, friends, to another amazing episode of the Fitness CEO Podcast. Yours truly, your host, Bryce Henson, here in the studio riffing. And this is part 2 of How to Be a Great Boss. And a recent episode of part 1, How to Be a Great Boss, just went out, dropped last month. And really, the vision behind this is a personal growth podcast. We're going to give you the nuts and bolts, the X's and O's, but also ultimately develop the soft skills so that way you can develop your leadership skills and specifically develop your boss skills. Because if you're going to run a business, if you're going to launch any sort of entity that's going to have big impact, you're going to need to learn how to be a great boss. You're going to need to learn how to lead people. You're going to need to learn how to manage people. So this really entrepreneurship is a self-improvement, self-development program wrapped into a business model. And certainly that's what we offer here at Fit Body Bootcamp. So in part 1 of How to Be a Great Boss, we went over looking at my notes here. How to be a great boss. Do you have what it takes? Are you sure this is actually what you want to do? To delegate and elevate, how to delegate yourself into a better position so you can elevate yourself in the organization, have your team execute, how to surround yourself with great people, and then ultimately how to lead, how to manage, which L plus M equals accountability, which is the name of the game. So that was part 1. Part 2, we're going to be covering the 5 leadership practices in our chapter number 6. In chapter number 7, we're going to go through the 5 management practices. We're going to go through then quarterly conversations, what that looks like, how to interact with your team, and then we're going to finish off with a final word on people. So that is the highlight for today. So let's go dig into our next chapter, which is really discussing the 5 leadership practices. And the value of this particular podcast today is I'm going to give you the nuts and bolts of really, how to be a great boss through the vision of EOS, which is the system, the entrepreneur operating system that really has been revolutionary in our business, in my business here at Fit Body Bootcamp, since adopting in 2019. But more than that, more than just the cliff notes, okay, I'm going to give you some anecdotal experience in some situations and some learning lessons and stories, how to apply these into your business from my lens. So every chapter starts out with a quote. This quote is from Dwight Eisenhower, the late president of the United States, saying, "The essence of leadership is to get others to get things done because they know you want it, and because they also think it's worthwhile doing." And that's the biggest thing. And they also think it's worthwhile doing. And really what that means is everyone, human nature, dials into this famous radio station, WIIFM. What does that stand for? What's in it for me? So at the end of the day, when you lead people, when you're a great boss, when you cast a vision, you have to be able to produce the message that what's in it for them. And I'm going to give you an example of this. End of 2022, I saw a big marketing opportunity, which is already proven very, very strong. And the marketing opportunity was to execute this big website redirect test. I'm not going to give you the granularity of the details because that doesn't matter. But really from a leadership and a messaging perspective, this is the point. The point is that I needed to raise $250,000 because we wanted to launch this test. And just like any test, taking the scientific method, sometimes tests fail, but many times they're actually very successful, and you're going to learn a lot through the process. But I saw a big vision and a big, opportunity at hand. But of course, it took money to deploy. So what I did is I arranged all the test. I put the parameters in play. Ended up raising $250,000. Not all, but many from our franchise partners who were interested in making the investment. Also, they wanted a return on their money to make it very attractive for them. And what I did, I also needed to brief fellow, host of this show, Bedros Keuilian, who is the founder of Fit Body Bootcamp and is the majority owner of Fit Body Bootcamp. And since he bestowed the CEO role to me in 2021, he's really released about 98% of the day-to-day operations in the business and big decisions, if you will. But there are still about 2% of big decisions, like raising $250,000 for a test on a marketing initiative or doing a $500,000 website build, which we've just basically initiated. That's going to be delivered to our franchise partners in August of this year. So big decisions like that, I still run up the flagpole for good reason. When I was basically presenting this information, both to Bedros separately, but also to our franchise partners separately, the content of actually the pitch, the strategy, the test was the exact same. The content, the nuts and bolts was the exact same. The only thing that was different was the way I presented the material. Because again, everyone tunes into what's in it for them. So when I presented to Bedros or B, I presented the value to him in the Fit Body Bootcamp headquarters. And of course, he wants the whole brand to be successful. He wants all of our franchise partners to be successful. But of course, it's a big test, $250,000 at play. He wants to make sure that, hey, that we're going to be doing some things that are diligent, and this is going to be well researched, and it's going to limit the amount of risk to the business. So from my positioning to Bedros, I led with the value to HQ and to him first, and how with the successful execution of this test, how it was going to benefit him and the whole franchise as a result. Now, on the flip side, when I presented to our franchise partners, I led with the value to the franchise partners first and foremost. And again, the value was there on both sides. The content was the exact same, but from a messaging perspective, from a leadership perspective, I delivered the what's in it for them value proposition to our franchise partners first, and then I laid in the value to HQ and our whole organization second. So hopefully that gives you some insight to really redefining and reiterating the quote by Dwight Eisenhower. You need to be able to get people's buy-in, not only because you want it to be done as a leader, but it's also going to be beneficial to them and worthwhile doing. And hopefully that story, provides a little detail there. This all said, getting into the 5 leadership practices. Number 1 is giving clear direction. And great leaders are clear. They provide an opening. They provide clarity of vision. They provide a clear metric and a destination where you need to go to in the sense of giving clear direction and feedback. So one example that we can all relate to, certainly I wasn't on this planet at the time, but the infamous John F. Kennedy, JFK in the 1960s, when he cast his vision with clear direction to the American people that he wanted to put a man on the moon. And that was a very compelling vision tied to a specific final destination. And that's a really good learning lesson from a leadership perspective, because you as the leader of your business need to be able to consistently cast a clear vision. Now, here at Fit Body Bootcamp, our vision by the end of next year is to have over 400 open active locations that are profiting over $10,000 a month on a monthly basis, which basically is incurring revenues generating over $40,000 a month. That is the vision that we're basically casting for all of our franchise partner locations by the end of next year. And that's extremely important for me as the leader of this organization, but for you as the leader of your future business to do the same. So that's action step number 1. Action step number 2, which is the second leadership practice, is providing your team the necessary tools in order to be successful. This includes training, this includes technology, includes your personal time first and foremost, and your attention, because at the end of the day, you as the leader, yes, you need to execute, but your job is to pour into your team. So if you don't have this space to do that, if you're overwhelmed, then really you need to take a step back and watch the last episode, which is delegating and elevating, so that way you can delegate, a lot of the things that you're doing that need to be done, but not necessarily by you, so you can pour more leadership, pour more relationship into your team. Now, here at Fit Body Bootcamp, we have a learning management system we call the Fit Body Academy. We have a mastermind coaching group. We have our elite trainings. We have our annual world conference. We do quarterly, coaching trainings live on Zoom. So there's a lot of different ways that we pour into our people. These are just giving you some examples that what I do and what we do here at Fit Body Bootcamp. But at the end of the day, your call to action as a business owner, as a future entrepreneur, you need to be able to support your team and provide them the actual tools and the necessary tools for success. Leadership principle number 3 is letting go of the vine. And this is so difficult at first, but once you provide them the direction and provide them the tools to be successful, guess what? Now it's the time to get out of the way and let your team dominate and execute. And this is so challenging. And I shared a story that I had a hard time letting go of the vine, if you will, when I first launched our business with our CRM, our CRM system, our technology billing system, to my wife, Tatiana. And now she runs the whole place, which is incredible. But I think that's really, really important. Also note, though, there's a disclaimer. Only let go of the vine when you have the people in the right position, in the right seats, and they're highly trained. If they are not trained, if you've not provided the clear direction, the clear training and resources that we just went over in the first 2 steps, it's not time to let go of the vine. But assuming that it is the time. And I'll give you an example of this. Blake Garcia, who is the integrator at one of my Fit Body locations that I own, he also supports our operations team. He is highly trained. He has clarity of vision. He's a high executor. At this point, have working with him since 2019. Whenever the direction is set, I can just get out of the way and this guy's going to dominate. Okay, I know this because I've built a high level of trust with his workload. And now that all said, we just have a new teammate Ironically, it's his wife, Allie, who actually I first met Allie back in 2017, and I met Blake through Allie, which is kind of serendipitous. Now, Allie is a high performer. She just joined our team last week. She's actually been part of our Fit Body Bootcamp ecosystem since 2017 as a client. She's a graphic designer by trade. She's an amazing person, amazing professional, but she's still starting to get, her feet underneath her at Fit Body Bootcamp. So it doesn't make sense that I can provide all the vision and then just let her go, at least at this point. She needs more training. She needs more guidance. She needs more tools in order to get that point. So that gives you an example, actually a dichotomy. Okay, both husband and wife pair, both have been with our organizations collectively for quite some time, but Blake has a lot more institutional knowledge at this point in time just because he's been working with me intimately since 2019, so I can more effectively let go of the vine. And that will happen with Allie. It's just going to take a little time. That's important for you to know in your entrepreneurial journey as well. Leadership practice number 4, which is acting with the greater good. And my notes here from the chapter: a leader doesn't just provide the message, the leader is the message. And really what this means is all actions by leadership need to align with the greater good. And the quote from the book that is used here says, "Do what I say, not what I do, does not work in leadership." And that is so, so true. And for me, I think why I'm very qualified to be the CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp, because I am a product of my product. Not only am I the CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp, I am first and foremost a client of Fit Body Bootcamp. I get my workouts in on a weekly basis. I'm also a coach of Fit Body Bootcamp. I'm an owner of Fit Body Bootcamp, and I'm also the CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp. But what I mean by this is a leader just doesn't sit in an ivory tower and say, okay, this is the direction we need to go. The leader is actually the message. John Maxwell, who's a famous New York Times bestselling author, talks about moral authority. And really, moral authority is walking your talk. So you as a leader, you can't just be able to sit in your ivory tower and give direct to your team and think that your team's going to execute. You actually have to be in the trenches, leading by example, having a high degree of moral authority, and walking your own talk, which is leadership principle number 4. And to finish off, leadership principle number 5, which is taking clarity breaks. And admittedly, this is actually very challenging for me. I'm going to give you some insight from the book, and then I'll give you some practical examples of 2 experiences that really have been, foundational into changing the company direction. In the book, it talks about thinking is the hardest work there is. Bill Gates, the infamous Bill Gates of Microsoft, actually schedules think weeks. He has, I believe, 2 think weeks a year. And really the EOS formula recommendation is pick whatever formula works for you. Is it having a clarity break daily? Obviously a condensed version of that. Is it weekly? Is it monthly? Now for me, I have a hard time with all 3, but what I do is I like to travel. Okay. And what I realize is when I put myself in uncomfortable situations, when I put myself in situations that's out of the normal day-to-day routine, I typically have big aha moments. And I just got back actually from the Philippines with my brother Barrett, who's the executive director of coaching and profitability, and just had an incredibly transformative week. And the big clarity moment I had is just the level of gratitude some of our remote teams have for Fit Body Bootcamp, how passionate they are, and really how grateful they are for the direction of our company. So that was a big aha moment that I really didn't see, in just my day-to-day working with my remote team. So taking a traveling break where I traveled 7,000 miles to the other side of the world was a big aha moment, a big clarity for me. Additionally, early 2022, I just got back from a long weekend trip, a Thursday to Monday trip to San Juan, Puerto Rico. And one of my dear friends that I worked with in a previous work environment got married to a Cuban chick. Actually, her family escaped Fidel Castro's wrath, escaped communism, escaped socialism, came to the free market capitalism of the United States of America. It's been a godsend to them and many other immigrants just like them, including me and my family coming from Europe and Poland. But that all said, our marketing team has made incredible strides over the last few years, and we've always been really, really strong. But what we realized is we previously had 2 different marketing departments called internal marketing and then external marketing. Internal marketing is focused totally on helping our franchise partners actually market to our dream client, which we call Mrs. Jones. But the external marketing department, being we're a franchise system, is actually involved in bringing on new franchise partners to our brand so that way we can share in the mission, and through them they can attract more clients. They can have their own vision of business ownership through Fit Body Bootcamp. And the big aha that I had was we did a great job of actually combining our marketing departments in 2022, but there were still a couple things that just weren't necessarily flowing from an operational perspective and really clicking for both teams. And the big aha that I had was actually the alignment of one marketing department is actually the way to go. But what we need to do is actually create two subcategories: one, external marketing, which is totally focused on bringing franchise partners, and the second subcategory of marketing, which is totally focused on bringing in Mrs. Jones or more Mrs. Jones. And the alignment of one marketing team, but ultimately having two individual focuses with two teams that manage those focuses, has made all the world of difference just in a few short months here. So that just gives you some, anecdotal example of the power of taking a clarity break, whether that's daily, whether that's monthly, whether that's weekly as prescribed by EOS, or for me, doing it maybe bi-monthly, but doing it in a traveling experience where I actually can remove myself from my business, work on my business, think on my business, has made all the world of difference. So that's how I've actually applied clarity breaks in my business, and some, recommendation for you. So to finish off this particular section and chapter, here are some questions you can ask yourself in the clarity break as prompts to guide you. If and when I lose a key player, what's going to happen? Are my current standard operating procedures working well? What is currently overcomplicated that needs to be simplified? And I'm actually going to really reinforce this point in every single clarity break that I actually try to look at the business. It's what is actually complex that actually bring down and make simple. How can we improve the overall communication to our team? How can I delegate more of the things that need to get done but not need to get done by me? Is my vision for the business or department on track? And actually looking at the business, looking at the department was the big aha that I had to, again, realize the right move was to align our marketing teams, but they actually needed two specific subcategories. What's our number one goal or desired outcome for this quarter? What's the number one people move that needs to be done this quarter? And then how strong is my bench? If someone were to move, do I have redundancy in my organization? These are all questions that you need to ask. For us, we've done, this is a kind of a hybrid of EOS and also a framework of a book called The Ultimate Selling Machine by the late Chet Holmes. And he talks about having bottleneck workshops. So on a quarterly basis, we operate our business here at Fit Body Bootcamp, which is our strong recommendation for you to do this, whether you ever join Fit Body Bootcamp or not, because the famous adage, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer, one bite at a time. So the question then becomes, how do you execute a whole year of productivity? And the answer, one 90-day quarter of a time. This all to say is we, execute these quarterly meetings, and really the bottleneck workshop has been kind of this evolutionary meeting that has really came up and through the ranks, because every business has bottlenecks. Even when you actually solve one problem, guess what? You create another problem. Life is a series of problems. And as my dear friend, my business partner and founder of Fit Body Bootcamp, Bedros, says, there's two types of problems in the world. There's first world problems and third world problems. And your job as a Fit Body Bootcamp owner is to continue to gravitate towards first world problems. And I'll give you an example of this. Third world problems is you don't have enough clients to actually fill your gym and hit payroll. That's a third world problem. First world problem is, holy smoke, we have so many leads coming in. There's a bottleneck in terms of follow-up. And you know what? Our gym is actually bursting at the seams. We actually need to relocate to another location or launch a second location. My friend, both are problems, okay? But you much rather have the first world problem. So for us, our vision here with the Bottleneck Workshop is to continuously gravitate towards first world problems. And one of the things that we saw is our coaching and profitability team and our operations team, they both provide support to our franchise partners. The onboarding team, specifically when a new franchise partner is brought into our program, they're really that first kind of leg, if you will, in the relay race, if you will, of really setting up our franchise partners for strong success. And then eventually what happens is they pass that baton, if you will, to our coaching and profitability team. So our CAP team, which is the acronym we use, can actually take that franchise partner from a support perspective and guide them long term. Well, previously in years, the support was growing in both departments, okay? Third world problem. Right now, there is so much support both from our operations team and our coaching and profitability team that the handoff was actually, there's being friction there because we were offering so much support that there was actually a little bit of friction and confusion for the franchise partner, because at the time of the handoff, that month period, there was support coming from both different angles. So what we decided to do to solve this particular bottleneck is set up a monthly alignment meeting. So for 1 hour a month, both our coaching and profitability and our operations team align. We have a CAP Ops alignment meeting, and now we're able to identify some of these bottlenecks, identify some of these friction points, and we implemented this in Q4 of 2022, and I can tell you at the time of this taping, it is smooth sailing. Can we continue to improve? Absolutely. That's the spirit of always having personal growth as an entrepreneur. But at the end of the day, it's got exponentially better. So that all said, to put a bow on this particular chapter, which is the 5 leadership practices, there's 2 steps to this in terms of really making sure that you execute clarity breaks. Number 1, answer the self-assessment and really, some of the questions that I just referred you to. And then step number 2 is whatever it works for you, whether that's daily, weekly, monthly, or traveling breaks every couple months like me, schedule a consistent time for your clarity breaks and watch your business explode. Hey there, my name is Bryce Henson, CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp, and you might know me as the host of this podcast, but what you might not know is that I started my fitness business journey as a Fit Body location owner. And since 2012, I've been able to impact my community while creating financial freedom, both for myself and my family too. You see, by using Fit Body's proven business model, we give you all the support and guidance you need to be your own boss and build a business that aligns with your passion for fitness. And being we are the absolute best at launching and scaling our franchise partners gyms, we are now excited to announce our 100 member guarantee. Now you might be thinking, Bryce, what is that? Well, we are so confident that we'll launch your Fit Body Bootcamp location with well over 100 paying members from day one on your grand opening that if we don't, we'll run your marketing till we do. That's how confident we are in our ability to support you and guide you through this process. So if you're interested in creating more income through impact, click the link somewhere around this video to apply. Next up, next chapter, moving along, we talked about leadership. Now we're going to be talking about management. So the 5 management practices, which I'm going to dive in. And of course, I'm going to start with a quote, this time by Stephen Covey, and then articulate not only the content, but I'm going to give you some coaching examples to be able to provide you some real world experience so that we can apply this content, into your future business. So by Stephen Covey, effective leadership is putting first things first. Effective management is putting disciplines first and seeing it out. And if I look at leadership, and actually from my lens, leadership is about casting the vision. It's about working on your business. It's about directing change. And that's something that I inherently have a skill for, but I've actually developed long-term and will continue to develop long-term. But management is once a system is defined, it's having that discipline to ensure that your team operates within that system. For me, that's something that doesn't come overly natural to me. Now, not to say that I can use an excuse, but the management aspect is something that I need to continue to find. And I'll continue to find that, but it's also, there's a lot of value in stacking yourself and surrounding yourself with people that have contrary skill sets. And for me, management is one that I look for my other leadership team that have that particular skill set. The equation in EOS is LMA. And really what that means is leadership plus management equals accountability, which we touched on earlier. So that all in mind, the 5 management practices. Number 1, keeping clear expectations, because without clear expectation, my friend, you cannot manage, and that's the bottom line. Expectations on that matter are a combination of one of these 4 focuses, and these 4 focuses are included in our weekly meetings, which again, we teach the framework, from our EOS perspective to all of our franchise partners. They break down to the roles, which is really the work, responsibility, and the outcomes. Number 2 is the core values of the company, which core values are defined by your leadership team and should be challenged every 90 days according to the EOS framework. Rocks, which are priorities that you want to execute over a 90-day period. And lastly, measurables. What are you really measuring and tracking to make sure from a data perspective you're on the right track? And just like anything, when we rolled this out from an EOS accountability chart from a quarterly perspective, where we're meeting on a quarterly basis for not only our leadership team but ultimately each of our departments, it was rough and rocky at first. There's always kinks in the process, which just goes without saying. So you have to understand. And interesting, Bedros, when we first launched this in 2019, after going through a rock setting meeting in our first L10 meeting, he turned to me, he's like, this is super clunky. I don't know if I want to continue with this. And the feedback was, I get that, but literally let's trust the process. Let's give it 90 days to see if this actually betters. And he actually ate crow because he realized, he's like, Bryce, holy smokes, I'm glad we gave it the 90 days because this has been a game changer in terms of implementation. All right, so management of expectations is number 1. Number 2 is clear communication. Communication is vital for you as a business owner, and assumptions are the worst possible outcome of bad communication, or I should say is bad communication. It's the worst possible outcome of a desired communication perspective. There's a famous adage, never make assumptions because you make an ass out of you and me, and there's a lot of truth to that. So that all said, there's 3 particular assumption rules to lead with more effective communication from a management perspective. Number one is actually two emotions. So when you're having like a conflict with someone, take a step back and say, okay, well, what are you feeling? What are two emotions actually that would describe where you're currently at? One positive and then one negative. And I think this is so important from an emotional perspective, because at the end of the day, human nature, we are a ball of walking, living, breathing emotion. And you have to understand this. So you really, if you want to connect with your team at a really granular and deep level, not only do you need to be able to provide the training and support from a structural perspective, but you really need to break down those barriers and be authentic, connect with them in an emotional perspective. And we know this to be true before language actually developed from a human nature perspective, from an evolution perspective. We actually learn to communicate through emotions. And this was why COVID, for example, put the fear of God in everyone. Like everyone was tense and afraid. But if you go to a conference, example, our world conference, you're going to feel the energy, the enthusiasm, the excitement. And guess what? That's contagious. And you know this to be true if you've ever been to a sports game. When you have momentum on your side, you're nervous, you're scared if your team's losing, the momentum's away from you. But then guess what? What happens on the flip side, when the momentum comes swinging back, that high level of emotion kind of gets in towards your favor. So if you can actually take a step back, break this down, from an emotional perspective, and actually create some connection there and ask the question, like, what are you feeling from a positive perspective and what are you feeling from a negative perspective when it comes to emotion? You'll break down barriers, and it's an incredibly strong communication tool. Number two is the question to statement ratio. So really, as a leader and a strong manager, you need to be, listening to your reports 80% of the time. And then you need to be actually talking, execute, being able to provide directive about 20% of the time. And really, at the end of the day, human nature, people want to feel heard. And if you don't make them feel heard, you're putting a barrier to your leadership and your management, and you're literally becoming ineffective boss. The last strategy to really make sure that your communication is effective is really a strategy called echoing, according to EOS. And really what this is when you're a situation, when you're telling your direct report something, ask them to confirm. And of course, this goes for you too. When you're listening to someone, when you're listening to your direct report, confirm, ask for clarification, and then confirm what they said. They're going to feel heard when you echo them. But also too, when you're actually providing that directive, take it upon yourself to ask the teammate of yours, okay, did that make sense? Can you actually clarify? Can you confirm in your own words? When you do that, you're actually increasing clarity in your communication. And communication is the name of the game, which is step number 2. Step number 3, maintaining a meeting pulse. And this is just good leadership. This is good management. This is good being a strong boss. And we talk about the L10 meeting. And really what an L10 meeting, it stands for a level 10 meeting, which really is a meeting that has the same consistency, the same day, same time, same place. And really the vision is you start the meeting at a 10 out of 10, and you want to end the meeting at a 10 out of 10, which is the vision, but also too at the EOS framework and really good leadership management from your lens. Feedback, creates growth. So at the end of the meeting, you actually just rate the meeting. If it's anything below a 9, you give feedback to make it better. And that way you're always recalibrating, which is actually a topic of conversation in terms of, creating strong feedback. So maintaining that meeting pulse is extremely mission critical from a consistency perspective. Number 4, from a management practice perspective, is actually having a quarterly conversation. I'm actually going to dive into this in a chapter here following, so I'm not going to really hit too hard here, but really to truly manage your direct reports, you must have a face-to-face quarterly conversation. A quarterly conversation is informal. It's not a performance review. It's an informal conversation where you just literally take it off site. You just connect with your, teammate and your direct report at a personal level. And yeah, you should be prepared. You should have some notes, but really it's a casual conversation just to, allow that, direct report of yours, that teammate of yours, some space to kind of tell you the good, tell you the bad, and then tell you the ugly. And then number 5 is the rewards and recognition. And in the book, it talks about Napoleon Bonaparte noticed his soldiers would work hard for a piece of ribbon, even more from an accolade. And it's just interesting. I know this to be true from my own leadership experience, leading my own Fit Body Bootcamp location since 2012, but also being in this leadership role at Fit Body headquarters since 2018. And there's 2 analogies and examples I want to showcase. Number 1, from a leadership perspective, from a rewarding and recognition perspective, and this is just a good rule of thumb from a leadership framework. When you win as an organization, guess whose fault it is? It's not yours. It's your team. And you need to praise them. You need to recognize them. You need to show them love. And you need to feel it like authentically. And you need to understand you have a value for people, because when you have a value for people and you can show them authentically, that's going to make the world of difference. It's going to pump their tires and they're going to feel appreciated and loved. And guess what? What gets praised gets repeated. So really, when you win as a team, it's your team's fault, okay? But guess what? When you lose, whose fault is that? And the answer, it's yours as the leader. And this is hard. This is hard to do. We need to suck it up and swallow that pride of yours and literally take that ego and move it to the side. But at the end of the day, if you as a leader start pointing fingers at freaking people and pointing fingers at your team, no one's going to follow you when shit hits the fan. And that's the truth of the matter. When you win, it's your team's fault. And when you lose as a leader, it is your fault. And you have to feel this with every fiber of your being. The second thing about rewarding and recognition, this is what we do at our gyms here at Fit Body Bootcamp, our franchise partner locations. We've created what's called the Fit Body Way. We have client milestones when they come in, when they hit certain number of sessions, when they hit certain weight loss goals and the body fat percentage goals. And we have a structured approach, because what we know is when we make our clients feel praised and feel acknowledged and feel validated, guess what? What gets praised gets repeated. And that actually creates more retention, and that creates the psychology of a client who likes to pay, who likes to stay, and who likes to refer. And really, if you want to level up your leadership, you need to be able to reward your people on a daily basis. So that all in mind, to kind of put a bow on this, the management perspective, this is all fun and games, but guess what, okay? Stuff is still going to hit the fan. Sometimes even after you act with the above leadership management and leadership skills and practices and management skills and practices, sometimes things don't work out. Sometimes even when you clearly communicate, when you clearly manage expectations, your employees aren't going to perform. So really the call to action here is you must have a 3-strike rule. And I'll go ahead and list these in new chronological order, which number 1 is meeting with the person, identifying the issues, discussing the specific course of action, and giving that teammate 1 month to really allow space to execute on the feedback given, but also making sure that you have a follow-up pre-scheduled, okay? That is so important. If you don't have that follow-up pre-scheduled, then guess what? You actually are not being a good leader, a manager, or a boss, because that's not increasing accountability. Number 2 is you're going to meet with that person and review their performance. And number 3, if the issue is not resolved on the 3rd strike, well, then unfortunately, you terminate. Now, the good news is, in my experience, okay, the vast majority of times, it actually never actually needs to hit bullet number 3, termination, because one of 2 things happen. When you're clear with your expectations, when you follow the 5 leadership practices, the 5 management practices, you're clear, you're supporting your person, you have an open level of dialogue. This is what happens. Number 1 is when you give that critical feedback, really your teammate takes it to heart, they take action on that feedback, and they course correct, which is exactly what you want, okay? So that's option number 1, and happens many times. The option number 2 is the employee or the teammate feels the friction and they realize, you know what, this actually isn't for me. They don't take action, but in not all the cases, sometimes you actually do have to terminate your teammate, but a lot of times what happens, especially if they're underperforming in situation option number 2, they actually see themselves out. They come to you and they actually put a resignation in, and or they just have the conversation and realize, you know what, I know I do agree to this, but as it turns out, I can't execute. Like, what's the best course of action? And then, of course, you can guide them and free up their future. And, that can be a negative connotation, but at the end of the day, you have to protect your organization, and you have to actually protect your people as well. And many times in a situation, if the person is not going to be a long-term fit, it's actually to their benefit to free up their future, to really support them on an endeavor and a business opportunity that's going to be a win for them and ultimately a win for humanity. So this all in mind, to put a bow on this particular section, which is the 5 management practices, you are a great boss, okay? When you provide clear direction, when you act with the greater good, when you take clarity breaks, when you communicate well, when you execute meeting pulses, and really when you pour into your team, make space for your team through quarterly conversations. When you do this, ultimately you create a really positive work environment that's going to benefit them, it's going to benefit your organization, and you're going to grow your income in the process, which is really the profitability metric that we really support all of our people, and really what I want for you as a new business owner. Chapter number 8. Which is quarterly conversations. And I told you I was going to take a step back and really dive into these because this is that important, because your team is your biggest asset. Okay, so it's important to provide them the direction, the X's and O's, the training, all that is super important. Without that, nothing else matters, but that's not the only part of the equation. You have to actually create a connection from an interpersonal perspective to really develop a relationship. And we are, in the fitness industry, in the relationship business. And this is what we teach our franchise partners, this is what we teach our coaches on a daily basis. So what is a quarterly conversation? I gave you a high level bullet point really to kind of, give you more anecdotal insight. It's a conversation you have every 90 days to keep you and your teammate on the same page. Okay, you only do this with your direct reports and of course the people you report to if you're looking, from that perspective as well. You schedule them in advance. You take notes, okay, for yourself, but it's not a performance review. You're not coming with a 10-point checklist, okay? It needs to be organic. It needs to be authentic. Yes, it needs to be prepared, okay, so you have some strategy involved, but it has to be like two friends connecting to really make sure that you're on the same page and you're recalibrating. And think of your cars, for example. If you've ever, hit a pothole and you got out of whack, well, you go take it in the shop and you get alignment, okay? So now you're aligned, okay? But you go on and you hit another pothole and a few days go by or a few months go by. Every 90 days or so, or whatever that is, you actually need to create a realignment so that way your steering wheel is not steering off the road. And that's really the same analogy here. Another thing in a call to action, this is something I'm telling myself because I haven't done a good job of, but really by teaching and coaching, I actually learned the most here, which is incredible. But really, these quarterly conversations should be off-site, and that way you create a culture and environment of really, opening it up and really kind of breaking down some rigid barriers that potentially could be in the office, which are good for day-to-day meetings. But really, again, this is kind of to take the edge off, if you will, and really connect on a personal level. They're called 5x5x5s because typically you have 5 rocks in your organization, which are priorities on a quarterly basis. You have 5 core values, and then typically you have 5 roles in each of the particular accountability chart roles. So you want to be prepared, but you also want to don't be rigid. And me, this is interesting. This is coaching for me because I'm prepared. My separation is in the preparation, and that's a huge reason why I'm literally in this position talking to you today because of my high level of preparation. That said, tattling on myself, sometimes I can be too rigid. So sometimes I take a piece of my own advice and take a deep breath, grab some water and be like, all right, cool, this is the game plan, but, we got a little off course. That's okay. I want to be a little bit more fluid here. Again, it needs to be conversational for your teammates' benefit and also for your benefit as well. And the goal here is to connect from a relationship perspective and really to make the situation and make your relationship and make the production, which is the desired result, that much better. And again, it's an informal conversation, one-on-one, where you're discussing what's working, okay, and what's not. You also want to focus the conversation about those core values, about the roles and rocks. And again, this conversation does not require documentation, but you should be prepared with some notes. And that's really important to really make sure that it's fluid, it's conversational, you really connect from a heart-to-heart perspective, and you also have some, directives that you can take with you. But again, it's not too rigid either. And really, this conversation tells your teammates you care. It tells them you're taking a proactive approach. And I'm a huge component, and I love this saying, which I teach, there is money in the transaction, but there is wealth in the relationship. And my friend, we're in the relationship business, which is really where wealth comes from. And that means you as a business owner having strong relationship with your clients, okay? But it means having a strong relationship with your team, which is really, really important. And to finish off the quarterly conversation kind of framework, if you will, I want to tell you a story. And actually from a teammate, I'm not going to use her name, we'll call her Sarah, but she worked for HQ for a long period of time. And actually she transitioned. She still works for HQ. She's awesome, okay? She's delivered a lot of value and will continue to do in her zone of genius. But she came in, with the mindset that she wanted to be an event planner for the company. And so that was really the role that was presented to her. And with a short period of time, we realized it wasn't a huge interest of her, and it also didn't really align with her skill set. So instead of realizing or thinking, okay, this person is not fit for our organization, what we realized in a quarterly conversation is that, hey, you know what? While she can bring value here, but learning more about the organization, her true passion, her true sense of purpose is writing, is creative writing, and being a strong copywriter. Well, guess what? We have a big copywriting need here at Fit Body Bootcamp. So instead of trying to fit a round peg in a square hole and leaving Sarah up for disaster and really, failure, if you will, taking a step back, we realized, you know what? You're the right person. You're just not, you're the right person on the right bus. You're just on the wrong seat. And that was really through a clarity conversation, through a 5x5x5, through these quarterly conversation, which is really how EOS West refers them to, we had this big aha, and we're able to transition her to her zone of genius, which has been a huge benefit to our organization. And the copy that you're seeing, if you're watching this, if you received an email from us, that copy is written by Sarah, which is incredible. The last couple bullet points to give you some dialogue. What's working for you? So come to Prepare as the Boss. Provide some specific examples, okay, of what's working for you in the relationship. Positive recognition. You should praise way more than you criticize, but ultimately you need to be able to provide critical feedback as well. Show appreciation. But also it's interesting, when you're winning, especially with a high performer, I want to challenge you. And I learned this from Nick Saban, one of the arguably the best college football of all time. You should know Nick Saban, who he is. If you don't, go ahead and Google him. But ultimately, I believe he's won 7, if not 8 national championships. Type an update in the comment if you're watching this and a big Nick Saban fan. But ultimately, what he likes to do, he challenges his team when they win, and he actually comes from more of a supportive perspective when they lose. Because guess what? When they lose, okay, everyone's their worst critic. So there's already like a negative undertone. There's a negative culture. There's a negative feeling in the environment after a loss, okay? Nick's perspective is, I don't need to kick my team while they're down. The learning lesson, that pain is already there. It can actually provide an opportunity to teach and coach. But when you win, guess what? There's a famous saying in sports, winning cures all, which is true to many extents, but actually winning can create complacency. So many times, even though you see Nick Saban like coaching his team, he freaking goes off the rails in the fourth quarter, even though his team is up by 4 touchdowns. Well, at the end of the day, if he doesn't actually be critical the time they're winning, then they're actually not going to get the big learning lesson that day. And I think that's really important for you as well as a leader, is especially if your team is executing well, there's always an opportunity for improvement. So if they're winning and they're winning, for example, my sales guy, Max, who's a franchise advisor at Fit Body Bootcamp, this awesome salt of the earth guy. Hopefully you've connected with him by now. And he's just a really genuine person that means well, and he's very driven individually as well. And he's gained a lot of success in our organization. But my challenge as a leader and as manager is to not only, give him accolades and praise, but actually give him some opportunity for growth and challenge him through all the successes, and not, kick him while he's down, which he doesn't get down, thankfully, because he's a high performer. But we all get down, I guess you should say, but it's not often. But really on the up and up, not only when he wins, be able to provide him, a challenge to basically, challenge his growth, so that way he doesn't get complacent with the win. And again, you need to be able to create a safe space for your people. Listen, show empathy, be attentive, okay? That's your job as a leader. And of course, on the flip side, which I kind of talked about critical feedback as well, you need to make sure that, you're providing that space and also, too, some directive for things they can improve, because guess what? You can improve, I can improve, and that's your job as a leader, as a manager, as a boss, to basically get the most out of your people and challenge them to get to the next level. Lastly, we kind of talk about quarterly conversations as they lead into annual conversations, which really quarterly conversations every 90 days, and you should have an annual conversation, which really just puts the bow on the experience. And while this is all important, it doesn't take away from the daily feedback that you need to be giving your team. And this is so important. What we have at Fit Body Bootcamp is called the daily huddle. We have a pre-checklist for both of our coaches to make sure that they're aligned for the workout of the day and they're dialed in and they're ready to go. But ultimately, at the very end of the day, the end of the coaching block, whether it's the morning or afternoon, they also do a huddle. Just think about Tom Brady. I like sports. I like analogies. Can you imagine if he ran and he played the whole game? Now, granted, he's retired, but back in his heyday for the last 20 years, if he played the whole game without ever doing a huddle, that would actually be chaos. For how much genius he is, he needs to meet with his team, okay, to align on the play, to tell them what they're doing well, what they're not. When the defense goes off, he's meeting with his team on the corner to basically huddle up to make sure they're aligned. And that's the same for you as a leader. You need to make sure that you actually create an energy and a culture of feedback. And so that way your teams are huddling up and that you're providing daily feedback to get them better. And to put a bow on this, this was actually the birth of the creation of our new coaches onboarding playbook, which is really a 12-week, very comprehensive step-by-step playbook where we really define and we take the average coach, the average person with the average work ethic who has a desire to be better, desire to be exceptional from a coaching perspective, and take them through this framework. And a lot of the framework in the 12-week new coaches onboarding playbook, which is an installed playbook that we provide all franchise partners to really make sure that they're onboarding and training their coaches, who at the end of the day are your product, okay, for your business, and training them at a high level so your product increases. And one of one of the action steps on a weekly basis is actually game film, watching game film, getting your coach on camera, okay, watching the X and O's, watching them on the mic, watching them doing correction, having them watch the game film, because a lot of times actually they'll give more critical feedback than you, but setting up a space and structure to do that. And when you provide, ongoing daily, weekly, and monthly feedback, guess what? Performance increases. And when your performance increases, your income increases and your impact increases. All right, my friends, traveling out to the last chapter of this particular framework to kind of finish out before I finish with some final words, which is a final word on people. And the famous Ralph Waldo Emerson with his quote to line this out: character is higher than intellect. A great soul be strong to live as well as strong to think. And really what he's talking about is, the character of a person. People initially will be follow you for what you know, but eventually they'll follow you for who you are. And it's about, you being a good person, about leading with moral authority, about developing yourself from a personal perspective, from a personal growth perspective, which, yes, this podcast is about giving you the X and O's in business, but it's also about grow you as a person. That's what I'm so passionate. My team is so passionate here at the Fitness CEO podcast to do. Great bosses are great people, and they know their company and they know their people well. They hold them to a higher standard and they get them to play their A game. And I'm going to stop here for a second. You as the boss, you as the business owner are the standard. Okay, why my team at Fit Body Bootcamp follows me is because I am the standard. Okay, and with the risk of sounding arrogant, I'm going to share a story with you. My mother-in-law from my Brazilian family, and they call this the efeito do Bryce, which is the Bryce effect, which sounds crazy. Okay, efeito is actually how you say it, for my Brazilian mother-in-law who's watching this. And ultimately, the efeito do Bryce, what that means is the Bryce effect. And it's a mentality more than anything. And really what that means is when I first moved to Brazil, and I lived with my wife Tatiana and her family, I have very clean, regimented nutrition protocol. So for me, I living my example, okay? I'm not basically chaperoning anyone else, okay, on the table, my family, if you will, although I certainly will put some polite pressure, but it's really about me, okay? It's about the mentality that I bring to the table. And what I do know to be true, when people get around me, 3 things happen. Number 1, they get in better shape. Because why? Because I'm in best shape, the best shape I possibly can be in. So therefore, it creates that change, that creates that effect, if you, on others. Okay, people will rise to the standard that you lay out. The second thing that happens when people hang around me is they start making more money, and that's the value of personal growth, of business building, and of coaching that I can provide to my mentorship and my people and my following. The third thing, and generally speaking, they just get better. They grow as people. This is not about me. It's about a mentality that I want you to adopt, because really we talk about getting people holding to the standard. You are the standard as the leader of your business, and that's the mentality I keep with me on a day-to-day basis. And it's really a challenge for me. Does sometimes my nutrition slack? Yes. Does sometimes my leadership slack? Yes. I'm human just like you. But at the end of the day, when you have that mentality, when you realize, okay, that not only you have to set the standard, hold your people to that standard, but you are the standard, that's when things change for you, my dude. They also invest time in their people. We are in the relationship business. They roll up their sleeves. They get in the mix. You never want to be a freaking leader in an ivory tower barking orders at people. Yeah, you might have the authority in the moment, but eventually you will lose that with a quickness. Okay, if you're only leading from your position, at the end of the day, you need to be ingrained with your people. You need to build relationship with people. That's how I lead. That's how you need to lead. And you need to freaking roll up your sleeves and get in the mix, my friend. The next thing is they know that complacency is the biggest concern of organization. I talked about this, especially Nick Saban knows this to be true. Winning actually, cures all, but winning can actually create complacency, and that's the last thing you want to do and want to be as a leader. They also guard against bad turnover, which is typically the boss's fault. If you have high levels of turnover and bad turnover, okay, because of unclear direction, because people are confused, because people are not feeling uplifted in a strong culture or organization, guess what? That's your job as a leader. That's your fault. But they also embrace good turnover, because sometimes you even have the most technically strong person, but they are not a good cultural fit. Well, guess what? That person needs to leave your organization. So they embrace good turnover. They realize that both having good and bad people is the same amount of hard work. At the end of the day, okay, being in shape is hard. Being out of shape is hard. Okay, having good people for your organization is hard because you got to challenge them. You got to be a better leader, a better manager, a better boss every single day. You got to develop yourself into that person. Okay, that's hard. But guess what? On the flip side, All right. Having bad people in your organization, that's also hard, especially the turnover, the friction they're going to create within your team and your clients, and the drop balls and the poor execution, which you want to avoid. Good bosses also know that it's your job as the leader, as the boss, okay, to get people rowing in the same direction, to get to aligned at your vision. And interestingly enough, this is straight from the book about, finishing with a bow on the final word on people. But really your job as a leader is to align people. And humbling myself, okay, yes, I have strengths. I have a lot of weaknesses as well. What I do is I surround myself with people that are better than me. But the trick is, okay, from a leadership perspective, and this is why it's important to go through all the framework in this particular, last 2 episodes, part 1 and now part 2, is you as the leader don't have to have all the solutions. You don't actually have to do everything yourself. That's impossible. What you need to do is align a team, align firepower, set the vision, set the direction, and then you need to get out of the way and let your team execute. And interestingly enough, in 2023, the theme of this year is alignment. Okay, that is our North Star. That's basically what I've been preaching as the leader of organization. And that is so true, and that's the same true in your future organization as well. So my friend, to sum this up, part 2, and actually going back to part 1 as well, I have 6 different takeaways that I want to leave you with in summary. So as a boss, is your job to lead and manage people. L plus M equals A. Leadership plus management equals accountability, okay? You must get it, want it, and have the capacity to be a leader. And I hope if you're watching this podcast, you're dedicated to personal growth, you're dedicated to be a stronger leader, you're dedicated to be a stronger manager and a stronger boss. And if that's not you, if you're not like, hey, this isn't for me, that's okay. Okay, being a great boss is not for everyone, as we disclosed in the first episode. You must be committed as a leader and as a boss to delegate and elevate. There's a lot of things in your business that need to be done. There's majority of those things don't need to be done by you. And literally, as I storytell a little bit, I just got back from a week-long amazing trip to the Philippines, as we have 3 remote workers that support our HQ team and dozens of remote workers called virtual assistants that support all of our franchise partners across the way. Okay, that are doing important work, but then work that does not need to be done by the franchise partner. But the good news is we have a system and a process, and actually a placement process to help support our franchise partners in that endeavor. You also have to understand, which I covered today, the 5 leadership practices and the 5 management practices. You also have to, be in tune to develop relationships, and really, a fundamental way to do that is the 5x5x5 or the quarterly conversations we talked about. These are mission critical to really make sure that you're connected with your team on an individual basis, because, again, there's money in the transaction, but there's wealth in the relationship. And to finish out, is strong as an effective leader you are, and assuming that you execute all these management practices, at the end of the day, okay, there's still an opportunity. There's the reality of the situation is not everyone's going to fall in line. You have to basically lead, manage, and you have to execute your 3-strike rule to protect your culture, to make sure that you only have the people that are in the right bus and also in the right seats. And if you have any cancer in your organization, you remove that as quickly as humanly possible, because that will affect you, your team, ultimately your clients, and your profitability. So that all said, that is the event today. I want to thank you for being on this particular episode. I also want to encourage you to share this with someone who maybe is on their personal growth journey, who wants to be a better leader, who wants to be a better boss, who wants to be a better visionary and a manager, and to really, creates more, fulfillment in their life by launching businesses or really leading people to a desired result. So I'd highly encourage you to share this. And if you got value, go ahead and give a like, give a subscribe, and write an awesome review on iTunes. That way we can keep producing this content for you for free. So that's all for today, my friend. We will see you in the next episode.